real answer. Why did I ruin what?
You were just saying that it was quiet. And then you walk.
Oh, okay. All right.
We knew it was over.
Low tolerance level to make, so
You've been busy. Have you had to cancel flights?
some,
Yeah.
not a lot, just busy. It's,
Bad time of year.
it is full, everything. So. Yep. Running around.
Good to go.
7 o'clock.
I see the time is 7 o'clock. We're going to call the meeting to order, and we'll begin with the pledge to the flag. I
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to our second agenda item, we're going to have a presentation in regards to the overview of the state assessment scores by Ms. Kirsten.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share some information in regards to our 2021 state assessment scores, grade 3 through 8 in math and ELA. Before I begin talking about the 2021 data, I just kind of want to take a little walk down state assessment memory lane. As you, I'm sure, recall, schools were unfortunately forced to go to a remote learning model back in March of 2020. And New York State, along with other states, applied for waivers, and the state assessments were not administered in the 2020 school year. And as we progressed to the 2021 school year, we had interrupted learning models. We had remote learning at times. We then eventually transitioned to a hybrid model. There was some question and some speculation as to whether or not the state assessments would be administered for math and ELA 3 through 8 in the 2021 school year. Many states, including New York State, applied for waivers. But the U.S. Department of Education did not honor those waivers. And the reason being, the rationale was, we need to know what impact COVID, remote learning, interrupted learning has had on our students. There's no accountability measures tied to these assessment scores. It was strictly information gathering and how we can utilize this data to support our students, support our teachers, and make stronger educational decisions based on a norm-based assessment, one of many multiple measures that schools and districts have access to. So let's take a look at our participation rates for the 2021 school year. And you'll see a cross section of our participation from 2015 through 2021. Make note that there is no information for the 2020 school year for obvious reasons, but you'll see that approximately 70% of our students did participate 3 through 8 in these assessments, which is actually higher than some of the participation rates than we've seen in previous years. Just to give you a little bit of background information, participation rates across New York State were at about 40%. And in a typical school year, across New York State, participation rate usually hovers around 80%. And there's a variety of different ways these participation numbers are used as far as a school accountability model. But for Akron, for many districts, the important piece is how we utilize this data. So the more complete our data set is, it gives us more information to make adjustments to our instructional program, our curriculum, but also to provide individual supports for students. Just wanted to take a moment to also recognize our building principals. They did a really nice job in the spring of communicating with parents and explaining how we were going to use the data. It was just an opportunity to get more information as to how our students were doing so that we could better support them moving forward into the next school year. So here are our proficiency rates. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about ELA. You can see the rates, grades 3 through 8. You'll notice level 1, it's the blue color on the bottom. What a level 1 rate score means, it means that our students are performing below grade level. So for example, you can see at grade 3, about 12% of our students scored a level 1. The red will indicate a level 2 score. And what level 2 translates to is our students are partially proficient. They're partially on grade level, they're getting there, they're not quite there yet, but they're on their way. Level 3 means students are performing at grade level and they are on track to graduate. They're on track for college and career readiness. And that purple at the top, level 4, those are students that are far exceeding grade level expectations in those areas. So in short, the more green and the more purple we see, those are the stronger scores or the higher scores that we want to see. Unfortunately, one of the negatives this year is that we don't have student growth scores. And the reason for that was there was no way to really compare a previous year's model. We didn't administer them in 2020, but also the test was very different. It was apples and oranges in a lot of ways. As you're, I'm sure, familiar, typically it's a 2-day assessment. There's multiple choice, there's short answer, there's extended response. But when New York State did not receive that waiver, they made the decision to shorten that assessment. All of the 2020 assessments were already printed, ready to go. So the decision was made to only administer day 1 of that assessment. So I will give you throughout this presentation some historical information on how our students did over time. But just keep in mind, it really is an apples to oranges comparison, and it's truly not fair to look at those comparisons too closely. But there is some good information to have. Hey, I'm working again, my clicker. Math assessments. So here's an overview of our proficiency rates in math. One of the things as I was looking through this data, it became very evident to me the differences between the ELA curriculum and the math curriculum. ELA truly spirals, those skills repeat, those standards repeat with just a little bit more complexity from year to year, but students have a really strong foundation in those standards and those skills moving forward. Math is a little bit different animal, so to speak. There is some of that spiraling, some of that scaffolding, but there are certain skills that are taught uniquely at certain grade levels that are needed to progress to the next grade level. So some of the interruptions in instruction, some of the loss of time working directly with our students did make an impact on our math curriculum. So those are some of the information pieces that we received from these assessment scores that have helped us make decisions to support our students this school year. So here's a little bit of an overview of some of that proficiency data. And again, keep in mind, this is more for information purposes. It's not really to compare one year to the next, but just to provide you with some historical information based on how our students did in the past. And with this unique assessment that we gave in 2021, how our proficiency rates looked based on that modified assessment. So you notice grades 3 through 8 in ELA, we still see a little bit of an upward trend. Breaking that data down a little bit further, this is specific to our elementary schools, students grades 3 through 5. And then our next slide is going to show a breakdown by grade level of how our students performed by grade level over time. So if you take a look, for example, at that first purple line, the ELA 3, and if you follow that line from 2015, you can see how our third graders did in 2015, how our third graders did in 2016. Same with grades 4 and 5. Our ELA proficiency rates in the middle school are comparable. Moving forward, and again, here is that longitudinal breakdown of how our students performed in grade 6 in 2015, 2016, 2017, all the way to 2021, noticing that we do not have data for the 2020 school year. But again, ELA, those skills, those standards really spiral throughout the grade levels. Math, as I mentioned, very different. So you'll notice some of the trends that we saw from 2019 to 2021, and that is again our 3 through 8 scores. Breaking it down a little bit further, grades 3 through 5. You'll see that those lines look pretty similar. And then our elementary school, Math 3, Math 4, Math 5, that similar breakdown. Middle school, grades 6 through 8, that trend continues. And here is that breakdown, grades 6, 7, and 8. So we can also look at that data a little bit differently. That is how third grade performed each year, but now we can take that same data and we can follow a group of students over time. We can see how that group of students, for example, the class of 2024 performed as third graders, as fourth graders, as fifth graders, so on and so forth. So to give some perspective, our class of 2024, those would be our current sophomore students in high school. So here is another look of our students, our math assessment scores, cohorts by trends, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. One of the things as I was looking at this data set that I thought was kind of interesting, that 2024 cohort of students that you're looking at, that is the last group that participated in a traditional state assessment cycle without interruption of instruction. So in my mind, that's why I'm seeing that upward trend, is that we don't have the data on that particular cohort. The assessment wasn't administered in 8th grade, 9th grade. They wouldn't have been eligible to participate because they're now on to the high school. So if we take a look at some regional comparisons, again, this is solely looking at proficiency rates. This is how our students compared. Our district is in the purple, so that is all of our students in 3rd grade, 4th grade, all of our Akron students. The red indicates Erie 1 BOCES, so all of the schools that are part of our local RIC. And then the region refers to students across New York State, with the exception of New York City and Buffalo schools. So you can see those trends. And again, it's interesting to note, you know, I think of our 6th grade students who did not have a traditional 5th grade school year. Now they're transitioning to a brand new building, which is in any school year a challenge. But now with those interruptions, the impact that can have on learning. And again, this is all great information for us to have, because it gives us information how we can best support our students and our teachers. We know where our gaps are in the curriculum. What content wasn't taught helps us prioritize what standards need to be taught this school year to help students get caught up. And we also recognize this is not a complete data set. We also collect data from assessments we're administering in class, different norm-based assessments, but it gives us, it's one more piece of information that we could use in our toolbox to best support our kids. Again, this trend that we've noticed, even specifically in math, continues in the high school. We're putting pieces in place. We're in the process of developing different regions review classes to give kids extra support on a weekly basis. Our academic learning center, how we're utilizing our AIS teachers. All of this information gives us more tools to work with to better support our kids. Same breakdown for math based on where our district is performing. Erie 1 BOCES. And again, the region, once again, keeping in mind, not a typical school year, not a typical assessment, but it is information that we can use. Speaking of which, I just kind of wanted to make note that we truly use this information. Adam has done a really great job of diving into data warehouse and providing our principals with really specific information on individual students, on different cohorts of kids that we've shared with our principals, and they have plans to work with their faculty and staff. Our BOCES professional development specialists have been working with our teachers to identify gaps, to help make adjustments to our curriculum, and to identify what is the priority, what standards do we need to hit the hardest, and with the most frequency. So all of this is helpful information for us. So that's a brief overview of those scores. Do you have any questions for me?
Mrs. Kirsten, a couple of questions. Right at the end there, you started to touch on the difference between this data set that was presented to the board this evening gives us that wide angle view on basically cohort tracking is a reflection and gives us an opportunity to analyze programmatically how we're doing on a wide angle lens. How are we doing in math? How are we doing in ALA? Talk to us a little bit, but just a little bit more detail. And I know you don't have the slides tonight about that deeper dive on the student level data tracking and some of the information that is revealed through that, because that granular level is really where we make the big changes.
Yeah, so one of the nice pieces that we get from the state assessment data is we get raw scores, a breakdown for each and every student on each and every assessment question. So we can look at an individual student and see, okay, where is the student comparing with other students in their cohorts? Is it a tier one? Is this an everybody issue where all of our students, most of our students are struggling with the skill and concept that we need to reteach everybody? Or do we have a child that needs some extra help in a certain area to build those skills? So it provides our teachers with additional information on specific skills that in turn they can use with their AIS specialists, with some of the push-in supports that we have in place. But it allows us to really design an individual program, one of many measures, not the only measure, because it is a one-day assessment. So we take that into consideration. But it is one measure that we can use to identify where do our students need extra help. I mentioned one of the great things that I used to love was getting that student growth score information that was so incredibly valuable to me. I understand why we couldn't get this year because the assessment was very different. We didn't administer it in 2020. But it's those small celebrations too. It doesn't, this proficiency data, it doesn't take into account the student that was performing at a level 1, who's worked really hard, who's now performing at a low level 2. That's a tremendous amount of growth in 1 year, and that should be celebrated as well. So this does give us some great overall information. It does allow us to make whole program decisions, but because we get that detailed information on the individual student, we can compare that data with other data sets we have and really tailor an instructional program for students.
Thanks. Sorry, just one more question because this is an important one. On some of the initial slides, you talked about participation rates and the impact that has on school accountability in the typical school year. So could you just give us a little bit more detail on the significance of participation rates and the impact that it has on our overall accountability?
Yeah, Adam, would you mind going back to maybe the second slide, third slide?
Yeah, slide number 2.
Yep, I'm going to have you toggle between a couple of slides here. So in regards to the participation, schools can receive a composite score based on indicators. And for at the middle school level, elementary level, big factors on that composite accountability score are participation rates in the assessment as well as performance in the assessment. And this is actually a change to the formula that happened in 2018. Again, this is not anything that is impacting this school year, last school year, but in a typical school year, I'll just explain a little bit on the impact of those participation rates. And if you just flip to the next slide for just a second. So I mentioned students can score a level 1, level 2, level 3. There's actually a point value that New York State assigns to those levels that students earn. So if a student earns a level 1, we don't receive any points for that student. If they score at a level 2, we receive 1 point. If they score at a level 3, we receive full credit, which is 2 points. And if they score at a level 4, we actually get extra credit. We get 2.5 points for that student. So all of those numbers are compiled. And then there's a denominator that's divided by. So that denominator is the percentage of students who participate in the assessment, or 95%, whichever number is higher. So it actually works against a school district from an accountability perspective if 40 or 50% of your students participate, because you're held to that 95% participation is the denominator for how that accountability, how that school performance number is derived. So the greater the participation rate accompanied with the greater students or the performance on the assessment does have an impact on schools as to school rankings and if schools are identified for in needs of improvement. And beyond that, I will just kind of say for us, the more complete the data set, the better we can use that data to serve our students and our teachers.
It's an important factor to consider. If you go back a couple of years ago, a lot of families, the length of the test, the complexity of the test chose to not have their kids participate. New York State Department of Education doesn't get everything right, but sometimes they do really listen, and that's something they did listen to when they made the test more manageable for kids, more realistic and more approachable for kids. But they also tied it to that accountability measure. You want to be a school in good standing, and if you have a low participation rate, it really impacts the school, potentially impact mandates for school improvement plans, where that time and energy might be better spent elsewhere on other things. So participation has changed in terms of the accountability piece, and it's really important. So thanks for that.
Any other questions?
Is this year's assessment shortened still, or are we going back to long?
We have not received any indication that the assessment will be shortened, that there will be a waiver. Every indication so far is that the assessments will go on as planned. But more information may be coming.
Don't confuse your waivers. Today, New York State Department of Education released a memo seeking public input for a waiver on the ESSA accountability piece. And that is something that Mrs. Treader could probably talk to you about for hours, but it's really about your funding and how you're appropriating funds equally, particularly if you have, say, multiple elementary, middle, and high schools. But the complexity of that reporting is really challenging, and they've heard from school districts. And so they're contemplating a waiver for that, but we haven't heard anything on assessments for APPR this year. I frankly would highly doubt it.
Because I just wonder if the participation rate was so much higher because of the shortness.
Uh,
And if you go back to this long 2-day
Yep,
test.
yep.
how many parents were
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was a big part of it. The multiple choice test is not that time consuming or demanding.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirsten, for the presentation. Moving on to our agenda item number 3, which is the hearing of individuals and delegations. Public comment session is for comment, not question and answer. It is for community members to share their concerns or thoughts with the board. When speaking, please be sure to approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. if you're representing an organization. We ask that you identify that. We ask you maintain a respectful demeanor and tone with your comments. Please direct all comments to the board members and not to members of the audience. We are allowing each individual that has submitted a pink card, and of which we have 2, to speak once, and that you limit yourself to comments to 3 minutes out of respect for others in attendance this evening. We also ask that you do not identify individual staff members nor students by name for critical comment. Please direct these matters to the superintendent outside of this meeting during regular school business hours. In the interest of civility and respect of different points of view, please do not applaud or boo speakers. The board will listen to all public comment, but it should not be expected that the board will respond. The superintendent may respond, or we will request individuals to submit questions in writing so that we may get back to you at a later time. The first speaker we have this evening is Nathan Wikowski.
Good evening. I'm a little bit all over the place tonight. I wanted to start by something that I saw in tonight's presentation. One of the things that you were just talking about right towards the end is the students who achieve higher on there, the students that excel above grade level. The school gets more credit for, more benefit from, more money for. Remember all those shoes you had out there on the lawn? You think those kids are probably better prepared? Those kids have parents that are actively engaged in their education. I would be willing to bet, for the most part, those students are scoring better, therefore bringing more money to school and showing the data more positively for Akron, right? If there's a vax mandate and these students can't attend this school, it will be disproportionately affecting that assessment data that you guys saw tonight, in my opinion. While we're on that topic of shoes, I wanted to give you this. My wife had written you a little letter there. It was with the shoes. I just got it tonight, so I thought I'd drop it off now. Just thought I'd mention. Next thing, and one of the things that bothered me again tonight, I thought we were on the right track last time. Last meeting, we had a nice dialogue going. You guys had a list of things that you guys were working on as a board. You addressed the public's concerns. You talked to us. You told us something. I thought we were on the right track. I thought we were going to continue that. I was looking forward to hear. And hopefully you guys will address some of that in your committee reports tonight on the things that you're working on behalf of the parents that are here. Last but not least, last time I was here, my daughter came up and talked. And I know some of you may have thought, oh, he just sent her up here. Completely 100% on her own, came up with everything she said to you about the masks. This week, in her band practice, she was given this mask to play her clarinet. Mask with a hole cut in it, so she can play her clarinet. When a 10-year-old sees the hypocrisy in this, how do you guys not see it? How do you not see how hypocritical this is? A 10-year-old playing a clarinet through a mask. What are you doing? It's for aesthetics, right? You're trying to show somebody something? Like, are you trying to brainwash the children? What is this? Why would you do this? I'm honestly confused by what you think, a mask with a hole in it, with a kid playing, why wear the mask? I don't get it. What are we accomplishing by this? You're teaching a kid that this is the rule, right? We have to make it look like we're doing something here. She's playing clarinet, for Christ's sake, in an auditorium. I just don't get it. And I'd like to hear from you guys what the board thinks, right? We talked about this last time. You guys had a nice little thing. You told us what you were working on. I'm still not hearing anything from you again. We need open dialogue, communication with the parents. Like I said last time, if there's a roadblock, if there's something we can do for you, we're motivated to move those roadblocks. You have to tell us what they are, though. You have to tell us what you're working on or why you're not working on it. That's all.
Thank you. Our second speaker is Heather Stone.
Hello, all. Heather Stone. I live in Akron, the village. I'm definitely miscombobulated or discombobulated. I don't even know. So anyways, on November 8th, first of all, I want to say I'm really pleased to see that the Erie Niagara School Superintendents Association appears to be hard at work. It matters for our kids in regards to masking and whatnot. I'm not sure if Akron is involved in this committee, so thank you for that. But what was really awesome, what I really loved here is one of the statements from November 8th letter, where the bottom paragraph, they were questioning why mask breaks must be discontinued. I know this is old news, I'm getting to the point here. So at the time, the school districts and school communities would also appreciate an explanation from public health officials of the data-based nuanced approach that they will take in developing off-ramp language for all COVID-related restrictions and requirements associated with school attendance. That's amazing data. I love it. Then we have an example on November 23rd, where we're actually using data that is collected in the schools. And one of the statements on November 23rd from the same Erie Niagara School Superintendents Association, talking about the spread of COVID-19 in school settings is exceptionally rare, and it gives numbers. I won't bore you with them because you can look them up on the website yourself, but it gives data. So data matters. And I know that Greg has been up here and asked, why we couldn't put numbers on the dashboard regarding the vaccinated and unvaccinated. Those numbers matter because if you get the true numbers, you'll see that it's close to 50% of vaccinated and unvaccinated positive COVID cases. We need to provide this data to public health officials and to Kathy Hochul before the state mandates a COVID shot for school attendance. And what's amazing is that, again, in the summary on the November 23rd letter, schools are a safe place. COVID spread is rare. And imagine that. This is data that is considering September through November of this year, and there's no mass vaccination of students. So maybe we can use this data and present it. I think it's important. It's important to maybe as the board, we've asked the superintendent to put out a survey. What do parents think? We've asked, maybe the board could think that they could step up and say, we want to put out a survey to see, would parents get their kids vaccinated? We're not asking anybody to answer any given way, but then if you knew that a majority of us would not vaccinate our kids, maybe you would be even more motivated because of money to advocate for all of our students, because all students matter. Anyway, so that's that part. The other part is, believe it or not, I'm going back to the November 16th letter from Akron Central School. And I've talked to some people that were really misled. I don't know why, but question 1A, what the board's position on vaccine mandates were. And then the bullet point that says the district is not considering a vaccine mandate for students and staff. We all know that that means that you don't have the power to do that, but some people in the community think, well, the school's not going to mandate it. I'm like, well, the school doesn't have a say in it. That's a legislation that would come down from the state. So I think we need to be careful with what we write. Our words do matter. It was kind of misunderstood. So I just want to give you an update and a reminder that yes, Bill A 8378 is still on the Health Committee. It still has the folks that are co-sponsoring it. The rumor is that it will be voted on in January when the legislatures return to session. I asked for data-driven advocacy on the school's part. Again, a survey who would take the shot and who wouldn't, who would homeschool, who wouldn't, who would move, percentage of COVID positive cases among the vaccinated and unvaccinated. I know the superintendents believe that data matters. Maybe this isn't the right kind of data or the right narrative, I don't know. And then what I love is that the school did come out with a QR code for folks to call, thank you for that, call members of the politicians that are in our area. I'd like to ask that maybe the school put out the health committee members list and encourage members of the district to call those members to ask them, what are they doing? What data do they have that supports vaccinating our healthy young kids when they're not the ones that are at risk? And even if they get this, many people get this, they survive. And by the way, the QR code has expired, just so you know. It doesn't work anymore for some reason. Maybe it was my phone. Anyhow, so that's that. And then finally, if we don't succeed, with killing the bill A8378, I don't want parents to worry. We shouldn't worry because unlike the school, as parents, our hands are not tied. In fact, I've learned that homeschooling is a viable option, and it might seem scary, but it's very exciting. And so I just wanted to call attention to the fact that there are a number of meetings, informational meetings, that will talk about the New York State laws, curriculum choices, learning styles, setting up your day, information on co-ops and special needs. I actually thought that maybe my kid would be isolated, but actually no. There's a whole community, and there are a lot of homeschool parents that want to help us along this. There are 4 meetings. There's one in Cheektowaga, one in Amherst, there's one in Harris Hill and Williamsville at our church, and there's even one coming to Akron on Friday, December 17th. So anybody that's interested in attending those meetings, you can check out Akron Students First website, and I'll be texting everyone that I know that might be interested for those sessions. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our committee reports. First, Ms. Forrestal, in regards to the Recreation Board.
Have a meeting tomorrow.
For ECASB Delegate Assembly, Mr. Grant is not here. Anything?
The next meeting's not till after the new year. There's nothing to report.
Okay. For ECASB Legislative, a couple of items, and I'm going to piggyback with some other additional things. We did meet. We met virtually. Part of that was to receive an online training. The online training was in regards to a program called Bill Track 50. Bill Track 50 tracks both all 50 states along with the federal government, where any bill can be identified and can be tracked. It's being used both as a representative body of ECASB. So if there's a bill that is of interest to a particular district or a legislative member of that district, that could be identified and that could be followed on a whole from the ASB. And also at a local level, we can look at bills and track those as well. What those bills will do, currently I'm tracking about 26 different bills, primarily in the New York State Assembly and House, including Bill A8378 and any sort of sister. It'll tell you all sorts of information from the sponsors, co-sponsors, the bill dialogue discussion there, if there's a co-sponsor, if it's in committee, and it will identify, get a daily briefing of anything that's changed. So if I see that a sponsor has been picked up on a bill, it will identify who that additional sponsor is, or if there's any other change that it's moved from committee to floor, that will be identified as well. And also, like I said, that's for the state assembly and House, but it's also for our Senate, and also it follows national ones as well. So we are tracking some resolutions that are both in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives. So that is currently being used. And piggybacking off of that with the legislative, we won't be meeting again until January. We will be setting up a time where New York State Assembly, I think Association of School Boards has a meeting where we do a little retreat to start off with, and then it's followed up by a day where individuals, primarily from ECASB as that legislative body, can go to Albany, and we will set up times to meet with each of our assembly people in Albany to advocate on behalf of our districts and our schools. As of right now, I am planning to do that again. I did this 2 years ago. I'm planning on doing it again this year. But we'll go through and have meetings with those representatives or their business officials in Albany. With that being said, the other aspect of that was that you were asking the question in regards to what else is being done. The first thing was in regards to the comment that Ms. Stone made in regards to the test to stay program that was identified by the Erie and Niagara superintendents. I did reach out to our legislator, Chris Green, because that is Erie County Department of Health associated, and he would be the legislator that would be able to have the most point of contact. I did reach out to him. I asked him where he stood in regards to test to stay. He is in full support of it. He is trying to work with other members to both remove the county executive state of emergency declaration, and is also working to see if programs like test to stay and test to play programs would be effective. Right now, Erie County Department of Health has initiated a pilot program, and that is with Grand Island. And that is in this testing stages right now that is going to be administered to see how it works, whether or not it would be deemed effective. So he is aware of that, and he will be advocating on our behalf in regards to where he stands with that. Likewise, I've been in contact with both Senator Ort's office, with Assemblyman Mike Norris's office, and with, I got a list here. Patrick Gallivan's, Senator Gallivan's office. Gallivan and Rath both indicated that they would issue a letter to Erie County Department of Health supporting test to stay. As of right now, they have not submitted that letter. However, I am repeatedly following up with them to see if that letter goes out, and when it does, whether or not I can get a copy of it. Likewise, in speaking to a representative within Mike Norris's office, Assemblyman Norris indicates that he is in support of test to stay as well. And his representative indicated that they would probably be reaching out to both Senator Rath and Senator Gallivan, because they have very good communicative disciplines within the inner offices, and to see if they could possibly co-write a letter of support of test to stay. So that's kind of currently where we're at. We are working to try and get a meeting with Senator Norris. Some of the timing has just not worked as of now, but we'll be getting a meeting set up hopefully between now and the time that the assembly does meet in January. And likewise, we're trying to do the same thing with Ed Rath's office and Robert Ort's office as well. So that's where we are legislatively. So you're welcome. Moving on, ECASB budget, Mr. Kenline.
Budget, proposed budget for the next school year is set to go out to the executive committee later this month. We will be having a meeting in February to make any adjustments to that budget based on the feedback that we get from the executive committee.
Thank you very much. Native American Committee, Ms. Forrestal.
We had a meeting, Pat had two people come, which I don't have their last names, but Charles and Karen come to the meeting. They are trying to read my own notes. They were introducing that we need like a native language act, which what they're trying to do is break the gap and get the language to have someone teach it, to make sure that they're certified according to New York State. And so he brought it up to the reservations to propose that, to teach Seneca to our children all the way up, because it kind of drops off the native is taught, is it K through 5?
Three.
K through 3. So it's to bring it, all the way up. There's a need for it, not just here, but throughout New York State. New York State is behind with that happening. Can't talk about that. So he brought it up to them that, they would be in charge and they would determine, what is needed in order to bridge that gap. And it's a really, I was just really impressed by it all, but it's still left in their hands as far as this decision. I'm sure Pat can tell us even more, but it was really fascinating to know that that's even on the table. And so they have to address each native nation, because there's 5, I believe. So that was really, I loved it. So I'm hoping they do. I hope they do that. The other thing is, we just discussed tutoring still for the nation. They haven't reached the times and the places yet. And the Wi-Fi got brought up, and then they were looking forward to having us come out there as we did. And I just thought that was, to me, it was, I learned so much even more about our people on the reservation. I just thought that was awesome, and it was a really great opportunity, and I wish it was more daytime, but I'd love to do it again because it was just very nice, very nice.
Moving on to agenda item number 5, superintendent's report.
Well, I feel like Mr. Wikowski and Mrs. Stone stole all my thunder tonight. So with, at the risk of being redundant, I do have some more to say about some of the advocacy work that's been happening. And to answer your question, I co-signed the November 23rd letter to Governor Hochul advocating for a statewide test to stay strategy, as well as replacing these open-ended COVID-19 related mandates with a data-based, scientific-based metrics for implementation or de-implementation of the various protocols that are in place. Within our region, the Erie Niagara School Superintendent is Erie 1, Erie 2, and all of the Niagara County schools. We meet regularly. Predominantly, it's the Erie 1 group that I'm a part of. Our spokesman is, and our president is from the superintendent, Mike Cornell from Hamburg. He's an outstanding spokesperson for our group. But you asked if I was a part of that or if Akron is part of that. We're specifically myself an exceedingly active part of that organization. I was going to characterize the amount of time I spend on some of that stuff. But anyway, I do want to talk more about those things. So in relation to test to stay, what we were specifically asking for in the November 23 letter is for the state to provide the technical, financial, and other necessary support to the local county departments of health and school districts so we can actually implement. You'll recall at the previous board meeting, I told you that the state Department of Health said you can do it, but we're not going to help. Well, that's not a satisfactory response. We're calling on New York State Department of Health to provide that support. The second thing we asked for in that letter, again, was to replace these open-ended, no end in sight. We all thought mask for now, not mask forever, but there's no database protocol that we're aware of that would talk about the removal of some of these preventative measures. I just want to add that what's not in the letter, this is being done in concert with our colleagues from the Lower Hudson Valley. So there is a statewide push among some superintendent groups. We're really trying to just stay on state leadership on these two topics and really have them clarify the off-ramp language around some of the current mandates and restrictions we have in school. Some of you mentioned one of our colleagues, our neighboring districts are going to pilot the test to stay model. That district was chosen. I think we all had our hands up, pick me, because we wanted to see how it would work. That particular district was chosen because of its size. It's a moderate sized school district, suburban district, a fairly regular number of kids, unfortunately, and staff testing positive. and a fairly sizable number of kids close contact, and that's where the test stays after those close contact kids. Very eager to see the data from that pilot. It's intended to run December 1st through before the winter recess. What I would like to see, what we all are asking for, is that they share the public data and their rubric that they'll use to say this is a successful model or not. Like, I'd like to know that in advance. So, for example, if you tested, I don't know, I'm going to make up a number here, 200 kids over the course of 3 weeks, what percentage of those kids actually ended up remaining negative? What percent of those kids ultimately then, because of their close contact, tested positive? That data is going to be really important, I think, for departments of health to make an informed decision. Even though we weren't chosen as the pilot district, Akron is still preparing for a possible test stay model. And you have to expect that we'll need to spend money on this. Right now, the test to stay model, the county is providing the test to the pilot district, but all other associated costs are at district expense. So that's why we want the state, a little state support here. So that includes the person that administers the test. Does not have to be a nurse, just has to be a trained technician. There's significant amount of data input. You have to input all the information, to the family that consented to have their child be administered the test every day. You would have to upload that up to a system called ECASP. It's a state reporting website, and figure out your staffing in terms of supervision, time of day. Now, the pilot model, if you hadn't heard on the radio, those kids are being driven to school by their parents before the school day. I had asked when we were discussing a possible pilot model, my request was, can we test the night before, clear the child for the following morning? And they said no so far in the pilot. So my concern is there's an equity piece there. If I'm from a family that doesn't have transportation and I can't get my child to school because of the lack of a vehicle or my work hours, how's my child going to be able to participate? So the pilot will tease some of those things out. So I don't want to shoot holes in the program. I think the pilot will tease out some of the challenges and successes so that hopefully they can make some refinements. I do know that the district that's doing the pilot is contracted with a third-party entity to administer the test. So it's, I won't name the name of the healthcare agency that you can hire people to come out and work, but they're paying them an hourly rate. I believe it's $65 an hour. So that cost comes to the district. They're using, I think, 3 people because they have multiple buildings. But that agency picks up the test, is doing the data entry. I think they have 2 people building. Here's the other equity piece that myself, and I can name, and I won't name them, but at least 4 other districts that I'm aware of, including us, the challenge we face. You have to have a limited service laboratory license to administer this test. It's considered a medical procedure. You have to be licensed to do a nasal swab, believe it or not. It is up to your medical director to allow you to use their professional license to perform this test. Akron and at least 4 other districts that I know of don't have the cooperation of our medical director. So I know I've mentioned this to the board in the past. Remember, I think it was 2 years ago when we had to do the testing, we paid an agency, Aviana Healthcare, to come in and they used their license. So again, that'll be another expense to us. If I can't train, say, a monitor or an aide or even one of my nurses, our nurses, to do it, I'm going to have to pay an agency because we don't have the license to do it. And our medical director, and so far the county, has not allowed us to use theirs. That was one of my other advocacy. Why can't the county, if this is countywide, allow us? And they have said no. They don't want to take on the liability. So I'm kind of sharing you the progress that is attempting to be made, but also some of the challenges and hiccups along the way. You know, I'm not going to repeat, I think Mrs. Stone brought up the comment, but I just have to editorialize a bit that I was taken aback during Commissioner Bernstein's press conference when she and the county executive explained the 4 phases that the county would implement to mitigate the spread of the virus. And when she talked about masking in indoor settings, she referenced the rate. She chose to focus on schools as the justification. So we're seeing all of these cases in school, which is true. The number of cases in school regionally are going up. Therefore, we're requiring masks in all indoor settings. I thought, well, schools already have masks, so why are you bringing us into it? You know, it just was an odd comment that I'm editorializing. But more importantly, our transmission, what we know anecdotally, our transmission rate in schools has been relatively rare. We do have social distancing, we have the mask, we have the hand washing breaks. If kids are symptomatic, they go down to the nurse, and parents have been exceedingly cooperative in keeping their kids home. So I would be in agreement with some of the sentiments from the letter on behalf of the Erie Niagara School Superintendents that schools are a safe place. They're where kids need to be. Any discussion of closing schools to mitigate the spread just doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think it does to any of my fellow educators, and I know the parents here this evening. So those are the talking points that our group is trying to reiterate, not only in our letters, but in our press releases to the Buffalo News and other media outlets. Now, final point on this. You may not agree with everything Erie Niagara School Superintendent Association says or doesn't say. We are a wide organization. Look at the letter, the number of superintendents who signed it. It's different from district to district. Some of the things that community members in our district may be for or against are different from others. So just understand, we may not be able to please everyone, but I want to be clear on the things that there is consensus around amongst our group. This evening, on a somewhat related topic, if any of you were listening to the radio, I spent about an hour or so at home between my end of my workday and coming here. I learned of a press conference by a local organization calling for some statewide civic action aimed at removing mask mandates and vaccination mandates, potential for them in public places, including schools and workplaces. I don't know if you saw that. At this time, I don't have any details. I really just caught it on a news feed. I'll go home this evening and read more about it. But I know the organization, I can't think of the name of it, a family initiative or something like that, Fight for Your Family or something, is calling for 5 days of activity to support their position on it. But what I could read from the news feed is it's clear that it will have an impact on school operations. Don't really know this evening how we here at Akron might address those impacts. We have a little bit of time. It's not scheduled for next week, till next week. So hopefully through some advanced notification, maybe some more information will be revealed that if families are choosing to participate, that they work with us so that we can minimize any potential interruption to the normal operations of school and maintain safety and plan accordingly. So, you know, it's just one of those things that comes up, we'll address it. It certainly would be easier to address if with the sharing of information. So we'll play that out and I'll be sharing it with the admin team tomorrow. I've already sent them the link, so they probably read more about it than I have. Couple of final things. I want to just briefly update the board that we did have our first capital project meeting on Monday. At that meeting, there were 3 main components of our district that we discussed. We talked about our transportation facility, we talked about our brick and mortar instructional campus, And we talked about our outdoor facilities, including our athletic fields and surfaces. So pretty much every facet of the district. This was not a planning session. This was an information gathering session. So stakeholders identified needs. They talked about some of their ideas. They shared ideas, their potential for improvements to all of these spaces. We had representatives from Clark Patterson Lee, the architect, and Campus Construction, our construction management company. They helped to facilitate the meeting. They took lots of anecdotal notes. They asked probing questions for clarification. Mr. Wikowski was one of the individuals at the meeting. This is our first in a series of meetings to collect district stakeholder input. So we're looking to schedule additional conversations in the new year. Campus is going to take the information from this and other meetings and synthesize it, and consolidate it, look for reoccurring priorities, and to help formalize a strategic plan to address a potential capital project in the future. One of the things that inevitably comes out when you have a meeting like that is there's a million of great ideas, and they start, it starts off, everyone's kind of quiet, and then before you know it, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. We recognize realistically, there's a budget to be considered, there's a timeline to be considered. The cost of materials, the delays in materials right now are really challenging. We'll never accomplish everything that all the different stakeholder groups could generate. That said, one of the participants of the meeting, said it succinctly. We really should talk about a phased series. So we can't do everything, but let's talk about what we might do in 5-year or 10-year increments with this project, then the next project, and the next. So almost a long-range strategic plan to maintain the integrity and the high standard of our facilities, so our community and our students can get full access to the best quality programs we can do. So it was a great meeting. We'll have more. Snow day update posted on the website. Hopefully you saw it. Just very briefly, New York State Department of Education does allow for remote instruction on a snow day. Practically, that's exceedingly challenged. We know many of our families have to go to work even if school is closed. We know that many of our kids may not have brought home their Chromebook or their charger. The teachers may not have prepared a virtual lesson that day. So if we're having a snow day, we're probably having a snow day. If, however, we're anticipating inclement weather for 4 or 5 days, and we can get some things together, maybe the first day or two is a snow day, and then we transition to virtual learning for a big storm, a big weather emergency. So we do have that option, which is nice. So that's communicated in a letter. I just put it on the website. There was not a roll call, but I think it went out as text. Last thing, I know I went long. Sorry, Mr. Massey. I said I'd be brief, but I guess I lied again. I have a real distinct honor this Friday, and I just want to share it with you. On Friday, I'm going to go to the VA complex in Batavia for a very special occasion. I have the honor of bestowing an Akron High School diploma on Mr. Stanley Wider. Mr. Wider attended Akron High School prior to his military service, but he did not graduate. So there's a section 305 in New York State education law called Operation Recognition. And the function of this law is to recognize and the dedication and services to military veterans who left school before graduating and awarding them their high school diploma. Mr. Wider served in the U.S. Army, the 61st Armored Infantry Battalion as a technician, 5th grade, from September 24th, I guess a year, 1944 to June 24th, 1946, WW2. His records indicate that he was a vehicle operator in Central Europe. He received the following decorations citation: Army Occupation Medal, Good Conduct Medal, American Theater Ribbon, European, African, Middle Eastern Theater Ribbon, World War II Victory Ribbon. And so I'm extremely proud, I'm extremely humbled to be able to present him an Akron High School diploma. And I'm really looking forward to Friday. So I'll be doing that on
Nice.
Friday.
Very nice.
That's it. Questions? Covered a lot.
No questions. The only thing I'll add to that is just in regards to the stakeholders presentation and discussion is that again, as Mr. McCabe indicated, it's an information gathering scenario. And the biggest thing is trying to get the word out there and be transparent about it. It's not something that is trying to be done under closed doors or what have you, but we're looking for active feedback in regards to what are maybe some of the assessments or what are some of the needs, where can things best be accommodated, things like Newstead Recreation Program, Akron Sports Baseball or softball, those sorts of things. All these groups that our kids participate in and utilize the school, along with the parents and the community members. Many people use the track. Many people walk the campus. These are the sorts of things we need to know. With that in mind, this is kind of out to the community, is please contact either school board members or other individuals that you know of to try and get that information across. That's what we're trying to do, is trying to capitalize to make a long-term plan and assessment for the short term as to what we need to do and how we need to accomplish that. And the best thing we can do is to engage the community. This is where we're trying to do that. So we would encourage you to identify those sorts of things, bring them to our attention, and those can be encapsulated into the program model. So that's all I would add with that. With that, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to agenda item number 6. Personal instruction, with the recommended action being that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, does hereby approve instructional items, consent items 6A to 6B.
Move.
Move, Ms. Forrestal.
Second.
Second, Ms. Kay. Any questions, concerns, comments? Yeah.
Motion carried.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 7, personal non-instructional. Recommendation action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, does hereby approve non-instructional items, consent items 7A to 7E.
Moved.
Move, Mr. Kenline.
Second.
Second, Mrs. Forrestal. Any questions, concerns, for discussion?
Motion carried.
Motion carried. Moving on. Agenda item number 8, district items. Recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education, upon recommendation of Patrick D. McCabe, Superintendent of Schools, does hereby approve district items, consent items 8A to 8B.
Moved.
Moved, Mr. Massey.
Second.
Seconded, Mrs. Bragg. Any questions, comments, or discussion?
Motion carried.
Agenda item number 9, special education. Recommended action is that the Akron Central School Board of Education approve the following classifications and placement as per list received as recommended by the Committee on Preschool Special Education and Committee on Special Education. These recommendations are for the least restrictive environment at the time.
Move.
Move Mr. Kenline.
Second.
Second, Ms. Kay. Any questions, comments, or discussion?
Item carried.
Carried. Moving on, agenda item number 9, school board correspondence. Tomorrow evening, ECASB speedboarding event at Erie One BOCES from 6:30 to 8:30. Thursday, December 9th, ECASB Executive Board, meeting from 6 PM to 8 PM. Agenda item number 11, upcoming events and dates. Thursday, December 9th, Prism concert for the high school, middle school bands, jazz bands in the auditorium at 7 PM. Tuesday, December 14th, elementary holiday concert in the auditorium at 7 PM. Wednesday, December 15th, is our next regular business meeting here in the high school cafeteria at 7 PM. And on Thursday, December 16th, the Prism concert, high school, middle school chorus and orchestra auditorium at 7 PM. Agenda item number 12, any board discussion, comments? Seeing none, we'll move to executive, agenda item number 13, the need for an executive session. There is a need, correct?
Yeah.
Yep. And there is a need to go into executive session. The for the medical, financial credit, the employment history of a particular person. Move Mrs. K.
Second.
Second, Mr. Kenline. We don't intend on having any business after the fact.
Nope.
Okay. Well, I know, we gotta vote.
Can you put out some type of letter to address, you said that people are doing a good job of keeping their kids home when they're ill.
Bill?
Just addressing
It hasn't come up asking me to vote.
the online instruction that we talked about.
How about I call you? I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll call you. I'll call you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Does he have a card? Do you have your phone number?
No, I didn't fill it out.
I can look you up in PowerSchool.
Got it.
I'll give you a call tomorrow.
Thank you, sorry.
Motion carried.
Okay, motion is carried. Then therefore we'll be going into executive session. At 8:12, we do not plan on conducting any business after the fact.